So that helps you whenever you are in a situation where the thoughts are giving you an idea of you not being sufficient, or you have dropped out of it, or you have lost it, or you have... It's not possible to lose it. The only thing you can lose is a belief in it. And that belief is not really needed.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to the 8th Fetter. And this is the 3rd lesson in the 8th Fetter. And before we start, we just want to come with a lot of caveats and warnings that we always do when we talk about the 8th Fetter. The 8th Fetter can be very destabilizing to listen to, because what we do in the 8th Fetter is dissolving all beliefs. We dissolve anything that you have in your life that you are leaning on, that you are standing solid on. And if you are in a place in your life where you feel super stable, and you are in, or you have done all the fetters, and you are in that bliss state where everything is just so wonderful, and you inhale the mountains and exhale the raindrops and everything's just wonderful, or you are here, and this is the first lesson you hear from us, and you hear from Advaita, it really comes with a warning, what we're talking about here, because what we do is that we poke to any type of belief that you have, and are addressing the sensory experience in the body of what your experience actually is. So if you are happy and in the love bubble and all of that, stay there. There's no point in poking to that at all. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. So I would say stay there. If you have been in that love bubble, or if you have been in that state where everything is just wonderful and everything just makes sense, and everything is easy and in flow, and you have no reactions to people in traffic, or Janice in the office, or there's no reactions to anything, and you just feel so wonderful, and then something happened and you felt that you lost it, you kind of dropped out of it, and now you're doing everything you can to get back into it. Maybe you have gotten back into it and it was wonderful again, and now you're back out of it again. Then this video is useful. Because when we rely in our lives on a belief, it's a mental formation, and that comes with a lot of things that needs to be in place for the mental formation to be maintained. And that means that we go from being in that bliss state or in that love state to, we oscillate between that and into despair, or into doubt, or into nihilism. So we go back and forth like a pendulum. And it's because both are based in mental formations, and both are based in thoughts. So we thought we would talk about the different ways that you come into this, and how the way that we work with the fetters, with the Buddhist fetters, how that can be useful or helpful for you. We also want to say that we are absolutely not scholars in Advaita.
No. I went through some phases throughout my spiritual journey of getting into things and reading about things and practicing things, but definitely not have never been a devoted believer, and have never been fully embroiled in that world. And so I have kind of the just slightly deeper than outsider perspective, where it's like I've been in it, I've understood, what it was tapping into and what it seemed to be pointing to. And it seemed very tantalizing and very lovely. And for certain points in my life, it was a very comfortable kind of belief to hold. Looking back at a lot of writing and things that I did back in those days, it was definitely the goal, as I understood it, was to become one with the big self, with the big S, and the I am, and to realize the true undying nature that will never can never pass away because it was never born, and all of that. And it was really lovely. And even getting into the more Hindu Advaita Vedanta specifics of how consciousness breaks into the different parts, and I forget so much of it now, but it's interesting. But ultimately, it needed me to take on certain beliefs that I was never fully comfortable with, and so it did not stick. It wasn't something that I did for ever.
So it's just to say that we're not scholars in
No,
Advaita at all.
no.
We both have experiences of that open space and that flowing and being a part of everything, and where there's no beginning and no end, and there's just that openness. We both have experiences from that. And then there's the Buddhist non-duality, which is very, very expansive in some ways, but also can, as a religion, be based on belief, which again is not useful, because that is just still again a belief. So what we're pointing to in the Fetter works and in the Awakening curriculum is unhooking all beliefs, really releasing all beliefs, looking into the non-self, looking into that there is no I here. And in the 8th fetter that we're working with here is paired with the 1st fetter, which is the illusion of a self, the identification with a self, the identification with thoughts. And in the 8th fetter, it's the big self that we take on. So in the 1st fetter, we completely unhook that egoic sense of a self, and in the 8th fetter, we unhook the big sense of a self, the big I, or the big self.
I think what is so important when you're doing any of this kind of digging past that 8th fetter experience is to not deny the actuality of the experience itself as it is. What we keep pointing to is the direct experience of it is simply what it is. It's just about, if you feel one with everything, if you feel expansive, if you feel like you're no longer paying attention to the feelings in this little isolated body, if you feel like your perspective is larger and you're really feeling that unity consciousness thing, just recognize that from the moment of direct experience of it, it is simply what it is, and in itself is not fundamentally different than your experience of being a little unified identified small self in this body. It's the conceptualization of it that says that this means something more because I have learned that this means something more. Some teacher, some scholar, some tradition has said that this is a preferable state of being to the one that you've been feeling. This one is less bound, it's more free, it's open, there's less suffering, less identification, and this is your true self that is what you have been overlooking and ignoring, has been there forever, before you were born, before your parents were born. The problem is, can you actually ascertain that by the direct experience itself? Or is that something which you have been taken on as a religious faith, as a philosophical belief? Is that something that you can tell in that moment of expansive existence? Can you tell that this is the same thing that has never changed since before your physical body was born? How can you come to that without appealing to thought in some way and belief that says, oh, this is what they were talking about and it must mean this then? Or even the ideas that, like, we often hear that this is what hasn't changed since I've been born. Like, this is when you think of at 5, this is the same. At 20, this is the same. At 60, this is the same. How can you even know that without going into memory and using this fallible, insufficient faculty that we have of imagination to try to put this experience into a container and say, oh yes, I do remember having felt that before and that before. How can you trust that? It's all coming down to some sort of belief.
And the problem with that is that belief needs to be maintained. Belief needs to be reminded over and over and over. If you now think of, a pink elephant, the mind will start to think about something else. So you need to come back to the pink elephant all the time. And what Todd just talked about, that when you have that expansive feeling, and this that is here is the same as when I was 5 and when I was 17 and when I was 30, and it's the same that I feel. That is the pink elephant. You need to remind yourself of memories where you were there, and like we talked about in the 7th Fetter, that memories are false. You don't have a single memory that is actual what happened, because you can't have that. A memory is a sensory experience that happened in the moment, a label that was put on it, what you thought happened in that moment, and then you have built on the label of what you thought happened. And if this seems confusing, go back to the 7th Fetter. That is where we talk about the delusion of time and the creation of memories.
And to follow up on your point with that, I've spoken to multiple people in sessions who have gone down this path, who have been in these blissful extended states and who have felt one with everything. And the problem is doubt starts to come in.
Exactly.
Or they found that it's not permanent and that there's something that changes, and then they're lost in this feeling of, well, I thought that was the end, that was the goal. And then it really can throw you off of your pedestal.
And also with comparing with other people's that you then see are there all the time, and you assume that what you see, what you say, they say that they're all the time. You assume that they are in that state that you experienced, that they are there all the time. But nothing is permanent. There's nothing that is permanent, not even a state. So and especially not a thought, a thought state or a mental formation state of a certain belief of I am expansive. When that is only created by you keeping repeating that you are expansive with different practices or with different thoughts that you have, or with videos you keep watching or audiobooks you keep listening to, and you need that constant feeding in for that state to occur and to happen. It's just a sign. There's nothing wrong with being in that state, but it's just a sign to you that it's not the end station. It's not permanent. It's not where you're supposed to rest, because there cannot be any resting there. You can't rest in a thought of a pink elephant. It will need to be reminded over and over and over for that feeling to come back. And unfortunately, a lot of people are feeling so much shame about that they keep losing it. That why can't I maintain that? Why can't I stay there? And what we want to say, that nobody can stay there, because it's not a state to rest in, because it's based on a belief.
When we're having any sort of experiences, whether it's what we consider to be identified or expansive and unity consciousness or any of that, we have to remember that, first of all, there is no self in there who is experiencing that state. It's a habit pattern of the mind. It's a habit pattern of this body-mind organism to create certain states of being. And some of those are going to feel anxious or joyful or depressed or sad or whatever. Those are the labels that we put on these constantly changing, arising ways of being. And for some people, when they do certain practices, they're what might have been a very low, sad, anxious pattern of behavior that was frequently being evidenced with certain types of meditation and other practices and other beliefs, that pattern can change, and you can have more extended periods of less thinking, less self-reflective thought, more open feelings, more spaciousness, and all of that. But it's not to say that one of those is now permanent. And what's really important, and so much that, again, we have seen in talking to people, is the identification that gets built into having changed from being one who is locked into negative states of mind and identification to one who is now expansive and big and one with everything. And there is so much identity that is built in those thoughts. And it's just to recognize that, again, that is another type of selfing that has come online. And there's nothing, again, this is where it's tricky, because I think so much of this does come down to where philosophical and religious belief comes in. There are lines of teaching that say that state is more somehow moral or desirable, or, if we take on all of the spiritual beliefs about, well, if you're in that state, then you won't reincarnate anymore, or you'll have these experiences where, you'll get off of the wheel of samsara, and, however you have interpreted it. The issue is, again, that has to be something that you've believed in, that you've heard, you've taken on, and you're believed in its raw, direct experience, in its most unfiltered, uncontrived state. It is just simply the experience, which has absolutely no value or better quality to it, or desirability to it, than the depressed, anxious, neurotic state that you were in prior to that.
No, and it's also, then it comes from that anxious, neurotic state is not okay.
Yeah.
Which is the second fetter and the fourth and fifth fetter, that there's something in here that's not okay. But when I am the big expansive me, then I am okay. And so then it's that needs to be looked at. Yeah. I would like to direct to the way that we work with the fetters, and that we expand it, because, like Tati said just before, that it's not that there's anything wrong with being in that big, open, expansive space, and there's nothing wrong with having those experiences. Those experiences are wonderful, and they're super valid, and it's also how can I say it? It's also like a being that we also point to, but it's just the access point into it that's different in the way that we do it with the fetters. In the fetters, it's very much based on the Bahia Sutta that says that in the seen, there's simply the seen. In the heard, there's simply the heard. In the cognized, there's simply the cognized. And what we mean with that is that when you look at something, you do not look at it and have an interpretation of what it is you're looking at, and that is what you say it is. So you don't look at a plant and saying, that is a plant. I know it's a plant, and that makes that a plant. That is mental formations. That needs to go. It's looking at whatever your eyes fall in, and that pure seeing that there's colors and there's shapes, but you're not adding any mental formation to that seeing. It's just a pure recognizing of a color. And then in the same time, in the seventh fetter, we dissolve the notion of time, of linearity that we have, because there's nothing in life that is linear. It's just a way that the brain is operating. That you have, like Eckhart Tolle has talked about beautifully so many times, that there is a now, and there is a now, and there's a knife. And I usually compare it with like a loaf of bread, and then you have slices in it, and that is a now. One slice, one loaf of bread, the slice of the bread, that is the now. It can also be like a snapshot. that you have a photograph that you take of the now and the now and the now. And I spoke with a friend of mine that where she said, but we do have like neural pathways. We have a nerve message that goes off that is giving a signal into the body. So message, if I push here on my hand, then a signal is being given. But with the snapshot, if you really slow down and you zoom in, even on that, if you take a picture of it, there's a neural message going from here. That's one snapshot, and the next snapshot is here, and then it's here. So it's really completely detaching that sensation of a linearity that is happening in time. There's no weaving all the snapshots together. It's just individual experiences that you have. And from that space, you kind of drop everything that is attached to that experience. So it's a very pure seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching in this snapshot. And it is not taken over into the next moment where there's a very pure seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching in this snapshot. Those two are not weaved together, which means that it's a very, very clear way of being that keeps reminding you of what is present in this now. It's also, you have a really good inquiry about pain, where that is using this technique of just really noticing in this moment right now. If you have a headache, for example, let's say, how do you know in this moment that you have a headache if you do not add any thoughts to it? You obviously don't. How do you know that there's anything different in this moment to when you do not have a headache if you don't add a thought? Mm-hmm. Obviously you don't. There is just this moment right now that is very, very pure. And with that comes a complete open acceptance of anything that is present in this moment, because it cannot be any different. There is no grasping for that moment to be any different than what it is. It is just a very open freedom to whatever is experienced in this moment, and to anybody else that is in your vicinity, to whatever experience they have in this moment. So you're completely setting yourself free, and you're setting everybody else free to be as they are in this moment. And it's just that. There's not any hooks into anything being permanent, being like this snapshot is right now, that is bliss. There's no hooks into the next snapshot being bliss as well, because the next snapshot is presenting itself in its own completely unique way, that we are delusional if we don't believe that that is bliss as well. It's just a different expression of bliss. Like I often say that having a root canal or lying in a warm bath is the same thing. Both is an expression of this moment. I mean, the pain in a root canal is expressing itself perfectly for a pain in a root canal. It's exactly like it's supposed to feel. And there's nothing that can be any different in that moment. There's no hooks into not having the pain in a root canal, because there is no attachment to anything being any different than just that.
Wonderful.
In the 7 Fetter, there's a video called Unpin the Eye that is about that, about how you unpin that identification eye that you have, at that feeling that you have of an eye being right here, and just allow whatever is happening or occurring in this moment.
It was interesting because there was, I don't know if you picked up on it, but there was an interesting little synchronistic metaphor that happened when we were, for those of you who are watching this, on the computer screen, we had an image of us that as we're talking to the screen. As I was looking at the screen, it went to screensaver mode. And in place of us sitting on the couch, all of a sudden it was this image of a lake and mountains and a sky. And it was this perfect metaphor for what we take to be the I that's sitting here being suddenly just gone. And it's just everything else appearing in its place. And it's really to notice then, while you are in that expansive space, or maybe more appropriately to notice afterwards, if that changes, that any thought that you have about that being something other than the simple arising that it is itself another thought based on identification. So if there is absolutely nothing but the lake and the mountains and the sky, where once there was a feeling of I, that's all that there is now. And as soon as you start to take in to, oh, I am the sky, and I am the mountains, and I am the lake, no, you've gotten trapped. You're back right into the same kind of identification that you had in the first fetter. And so it's really that being aware of the traps of the ego and the traps of the mind to want to conceptualize, grasp, and own things. And if it's just the expansive space around you, then it's just the expansive space around you. Let it be that. As soon as any sort of feeling of attainment comes into it, ownership and attainment, and the idea that like I have transcended the little I am now I have succeeded on the quest, I am there, you're back right where you started from. Like
I'm suddenly thinking of I saw like a cartoon of a monk sitting and meditating, where he goes like, I have transcended everything, I am enlightened, I can't wait to tell the others.
Exactly.
That it's really that the moment you start to own, I am the rain, I am the, well, hang on, we're back in the first fetter now. I am what? Are you sure about that? Are you sure that can even be expressed? And what we normally point to here in the 8th fetter, because it can obviously, it's nice to have some tools, and we have lots of inquiries that are pointing, but a tool that is very useful is to, that yes, you can have that feeling of the mountains and the rain and the forest and the squirrels and that open expansiveness, but the moment you can put words into it, or the moment you can explain what it is you're experiencing, it's not that. Then you have minimized. Then you have made it into an I experience and into an ego experience, something that can be put into words. It's not that. It's like you can never explain how a rainbow looks, or how you feel when you see a child smile, or how a strawberry smells. It is that sensory experience that is happening in the body, that lots of things are happening, and it's just transcending and beautiful and transformative. But the moment you start to explain, you're minimizing, you're making it less than it actually is, and you're placing an I in the middle that is trying to explain that experience. So if you had those Advaita experiences, that is just that pure expansiveness, that is where we would like for you to go to, but not have any thoughts about it, and not having any words describing it, or in any way minimizing the experience, but just keep being in that expansion. And if you have that, like Todd said, that, oh, I'm here now, oh wait, no, are you sure? Or are we back in the first fetter again?
Yeah, and if you do want to see through that, noticing again what is in the actual 5 senses, and how much of the feeling of, when you have that feeling of expansiveness, when it feels like you are the entire room, the entire space around you and all of that, notice, is that actually showing up in your physical sense field? We tend to a lot of times use very nebulous concepts to talk about spaciousness and awareness and consciousness and all of those things. And notice what can be felt in your senses and what is that thought that's being put onto it or assumption about it. And so if you feel like you are the entire room and you feel like you are the mountains and the sky, just notice it's being felt in the physical sense. In what way is that being felt in the physical sense? And then just be aware that that is just a physical sensation. And don't make more out of it than it is. Don't make it into, now I am made of the same stuff that they are, and all of the other ways that the mind can play with it and manipulate it. Just feel the raw physical sensation of being as expansive as you seem to be in that moment. But then don't get caught up on it if all of a sudden now you just feel like a human body again. Still feel the physical sensations of a human body. How does that differ phenomenologically than from feeling like you were the mountain?
Yeah, because it is what we are coming back to all the time, and also why we have the embodiment exercises where you open up to how it feels to be in the body, and how and really getting to know that when you feel anxiety, or when you feel anger or guilt or shame or anything like that, that when you feel those emotions and those seem so real, it's why we're picking it apart and going like, well, there's a sensory experience in the body. Tell me about that. How does that feel? As contraction in the chest. I feel suffocating in the. I feel tears coming up. I feel okay. Now detach the thoughts about that being anger or anxiety or guilt or shame, and just sit with the sensory experiences in this snapshot right now without a thought. What is actually happening? How does it feel? And can you be in a body where it feels like you're suffocating and you can hardly breathe? And can you be in a body where this is happening? Because it's all we have that we can lean on. It's what we experience in our direct experience, in our seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and not have any thoughts added to it, because that's the other side of it. They're both the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and then there's the thought of what we are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. But we're detaching that part and just staying with that very, very raw experience in the sensory field.
Yeah, and like I was saying, even be aware of those concepts like consciousness and awareness, and especially the ones where I am consciousness and I am awareness, because those just have identity built into the phrasing of them even. But just notice when you do those exercises where you're noticing the spaciousness there that seems to be, I can experience objects in the room. I can see, the visual field. I can hear the sensory, the raw sensory data of sound. I can feel the raw sensory data of touch sensations and internal physical sensations. But notice if you start to, I have the idea then that there is some unchanging substrate beneath all of that, that there is something which must be here by virtue solely of the fact that you can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch anything. That is an assumption by the mind. That is that thing called consciousness something that you can actually grasp in any of the sense fields? How is that evidence to you, other than that somebody has said to you that if you are aware, or if there is some sort of knowing that a world exists or an internal world exists, then there must be consciousness there making that happen. And that can only be a belief. So just notice whether it's the idea that a thought is happening in consciousness, or that a thought is made of consciousness, or that the entire world is made of consciousness, and that I am a part of consciousness, and that the consciousness is all that there is. How can you tell any of that
in your direct
experience? How is it not simply thought, or more specifically, a belief thought?
Yeah.
And it's just an invitation to inquiry.
And it's one of those things that are really difficult to discover, that because it's a belief, because just like you, there are so many things that we believe in to be true and believing to be in a certain way, and we have never ever questioned it. And all we just want you to do is to question it, because in a belief, like we started by saying, in a belief there is an oscillation between a belief and doubt. And it's like that with all beliefs, with no matter what you believe. If it's something that you know in your direct experience, then there's not putting any label on it at all. It's just what is. For example, if you close your eyes right now and you just notice that tingling sensation that you have in your feet right now, and you just notice that tingling sensation. If you then remove the label of feet, because with your eyes closed, you do not know that you have feet.
You might see a mental image that still seems to overlay it, that implies that you have feet, but if you also unpin that and let that go and come to those raw sensations of tingling,
there's just a tingling sensation happening somewhere in space. And even if you remove the label tingling sensation, there is just in this snapshot, and in this snapshot, and in this snapshot, that just different sensations happening in different places in space that is non-placeable. And if you do not weave those snapshots together, there is no continuity in any of it. So it's really practicing coming back into a sensory experience of what is present right now. And just like before, when you were sitting with your eyes closed and you just noticed that tingling sensation, there's no beliefs anywhere in that. It's just a sensory experience that is arising due to your nervous system. And that is not a belief. It's not something that can be questioned, that a tingly sensation is experienced in the nervous system. In that moment, that is there. But the moment you start to call it a tingling sensation, saying it's happening in my feet, and I know that when I close my eyes, my feet and my body completely vanishes, then you're creating it something out of nothing. You're making it into a belief. And it's also the last thing that we want to emphasize is that anything that we say cannot be true.
No.
You cannot rely on anything we say or any pointing that we do. You cannot create what we say into another belief. Then you're back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to stay with you in your direct experience. It needs to be completely unhooked from anyone or anything. It can't be us that are leading you into these insights. You need to unhook that as well. That it can just be a very pure and very, very raw sensory experience that is happening in a snapshot, to no one, where there's not an I experiencing it either.
Yeah. I also want to say too, just that even nervous system is also. I
It's
don't
a
want
label.
anybody to also
It's a
get
label.
caught up on that.
Yeah.
Because it's also not in your direct experience that it is a nervous system. You can't
We
even
don't
tell
know
that you have a nervous system.
We don't
in your
know that
direct
we have a
experience.
nervous system.
But it's a way of pointing to the fact that just because it's there, it doesn't imply something separate from it, which is making it happen, or something that is knowing it in itself. So it can be useful as a pointer early on when you're starting out trying to see through the first fetter, to get to this thing where you're looking for that which is not thought, that which is not the local identified self that you've feel that you are all the time. And so it's fine to have that experience of spaciousness, of non-identification in that way, of having that the idea that, well, then everything is just awareness or consciousness. It's like a temporary improvement on the really tight, constricted identification that you've been living through before then. But it's not the end goal.
It's not a resting place.
No, it's like a temporary reprieve. But ultimately, it's just becomes just as much identified as the original I was. But I was just going to say, too, in pointing through that, just notice, if you're looking in the visual field, there is an assumption that when we speak in the sixth Fetter terms, that there is something out there and there is something in here which knows it. And if you've done the sixth Fetter work, that has hopefully collapsed to where you recognize that, no, it is just the appearance of sight with nobody back here who is looking at it. There's no witness or there's no object separate from it. But in the eighth Fetter, there can still be this subtle sublimation of that witness that went from being the little eye of the first Fetter to the more nebulous witness of the sixth Fetter to just expansive consciousness of the eighth
Awareness
Fetter.
looking through the eyes.
That okay, it's not me who sees it, but there's still consciousness that is seeing it or is aware of what I'm seeing or what it's seeing. And just recognize again, in your direct experience, can you find consciousness? Is it anything other than an assumption based on the fact that a visual experience is experienceable, that it's apparent in this moment? And keep looking back behind it. Look for anything that seems to feel separate from it. And what you might notice is that there are feelings of the physical sensations, like, the more expansive feelings of the physical sensation, which are being sort of almost subconsciously compared to the visual field to make it seem like the visual field is happening in a certain space and that the visual field is in reference to something else. And just really be diligent with sitting with the actual direct experience of the visual field or the direct experience of the auditory field or the physical sense field, to really recognize that there can be a thought which claims it. There can be a thought which uses memory to compare what was just there to what's here now, or to imaginations of what might be coming in the future. But each one of those is an individual thought that is not itself even being known by some greater consciousness. It's just to recognize everything is simply appearing as it is. There are faculties that are beyond our knowledge of how it even happens or of how any of this comes about, because again, we don't know. None of us know. All of the thousands of years of teachings and now some of the scientific research that's pointing in different directions are all very tantalizing, and there's a lot of really interesting there's interesting information that seems to be pointing in certain directions, but we can't say any of it conclusively. So the only thing at this point in history that we can do is relate just to our pure experience and not attach to any belief that it has to mean something specific or that it shouldn't mean something specific. We don't want to get bound into any traps of belief. It's just the absolute raw experience for its own sake, as its own sake, without any additional concepts that are overlaying it and polluting it.
Really well. Really well.
And again, we know nothing.
No, absolutely not. The reason why we're talking about this is also that when you work with the Fetter model and you are entering into what we call the practical non-duality, where it's not radical at all, but it's how you practically in your everyday life can live with these experiences and can incorporate them into a life, into a lived experience. The reason why we talk about it is also that this is exercises that is needed for you to work with the 9th and the 10th Fetter. That we are kind of like pointing your your what do you call that, headlight,
headlight.
that your headlight in that direction of being in that pure flow where there is not an I that it has preferences. There's nobody that is deciding to do anything. There's no free will in deciding to do anything. There's just that movement that is happening. And the 10th fetter of absolutely not knowing anything, that we do not know what any of this is. We can put lots of ideas and fairy tales and stories and all that on it, but we do not know. We can have lots of scientific studies and lots of beliefs and religion and all of that pointing, but we do not know. So what we are pointing to with the fetter work that we do is just into that open space of an experience without an experiencer. So it's just that pure experience in this moment where there's nothing attached to it and there's not even an I experiencing anything.
Yeah. And if you feel at this point like you still need that thing, then that's fine. You know, like you said, there are different lanes for different types, and at different points in life it might be more beneficial for you to be in a specific...
I'm not sure this video would have been useful for me like 40 years ago. It wouldn't have been useful. It would definitely have been useful like 20 years ago. So it's also that seeing is this useful for you now, or is there something else that actually gives you a feeling of freedom? Because that is all we are pointing to. It's how you can experience a freedom in you, where you set you free, where you set others free, and there's just that pure being, stillness, simplicity, and contentment in all aspects of your life, because there's no attachment to anything being in a certain way. And whichever way gives you that, then we are super, super happy, because that is exactly what we want for you.
Yeah. If this feels scary or threatening or anything, then by all means, just move on. Do something else. Do what speaks to you, because that's what's right for you in this moment. It's only when you have done other things, when you have done certain paths, and if they prove to not be the permanent fix that you expected them to be, then you might be looking for, okay, well, how do I move on from here now? Because that feels very like a bit of a letdown and very unstable, because now it's like, well, which direction do I go?
And if you are there where you are really happy with being in the bliss state, and yes, you are oscillating back and forth, the next time you are in that negative state where it's either nihilism, or it's doubt, or it's fear, or it's anything, then close your eyes and breathe. Feel into the body in this moment right now, in this snapshot right now. What is the experience? Not with an I experiencing, but what is the experience? And then notice this now, and this now, and this now, and this now. And completely unpin anything that your mind is trying to create into stories, or into, yay, I'm out of it, or whatever. Unpin all of it. Let it go. Drop it. Just notice what is alive in you right now, in this moment. Gone with that, in this moment, and gone with that. So that helps you whenever you are in a situation where the thoughts are giving you an idea of you not being sufficient, or you have dropped out of it, or you have lost it, or it's not possible to lose it. The only thing you can lose is a belief in it. And that belief is not really needed. Was that it? I think that was it.
That was about it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.